we know that Neville doesn't know how to run a spreadsheet.
Neville's pretty good. He's pretty proficient with a spreadsheet. You might be surprised.
Okay, I'll take that back.
Yeah, he's actually changed numbers in spreadsheets, you know, as we've been talking through things. So yeah, he's
and
very
he knows
proficient.
the macros, huh?
Now that's you're stretching both of us with that. So yeah, you know, everything from, you know, I guess in the past decade I've been pretty involved in really rolling out and initiating our backhaul strategy, which is really substantially all fiber, as most of you probably know. We made that decision really early on, just because we wanted to take advantage of fiber with our HSPA network and really take full advantage of the speeds that HSPA Plus offered. And we saw that as an opportunity, gosh, 7 or 8 years ago now, and we've been pretty aggressive, as most of you know, in terms of rolling fiber out across the network. More recently, you know, we spent a lot of time designing the strategy for rolling LTE out across the network, and specifically growing our LTE footprint to 300 million pops this year, which is pretty exciting from a little T-Mobile perspective. You know, who would have imagined 3 years ago, in the cusp of the AT&T deal, that in 36 months we'd have not only a nationwide LTE network, but a competitive LTE network to the likes of Verizon and AT&T.
Yeah, but that was back when you were number 4.
Yeah, we're not number 4 anymore. That's pretty exciting. We haven't been number 4 for several quarters if you do the math right.
If you do the math right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Marcelo says you're number 4.
Okay. But we're not.
Tweet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we got past that point. We understand your role. And you're the finance guy in the technology organization.
That's right.
And in fact, you're actually a bit of the CFO in a way.
Yeah, it's a weird role. I don't think the role exists in any of the other national carriers.
No, it doesn't.
And it's, yeah, it's kind of a CFO role, but there's more to it because I get a lot more involved in deployment than I think a typical CFO in the network organization would be involved.
Which is why we asked Dave to come today, because we really need a CFO's perspective on the issues that we're talking about here. And, there's been a lot of hype associated with small cells and densification. And I think T-Mobile has brought some discipline and rationality to it to say, what is it really for? How does it really help? And is it worth spending money on? No?
It's a journey. And we're still, in my view, let me back up a second and say, in the past 3 years, we've really focused on deploying an LTE network. We've not focused on deploying small cells. Some other people have done that. We really haven't. It's only been, frankly, the last 6 to 12 months that we've even really thought about it. From a purely a small cell perspective. That's not to say that they're not an important part of our network. We acquired Metro PCS a 3 years ago now, and Metro came with a whole bunch of distributed antenna nodes to the extent we've integrated those into our network.
Outdoor DAS.
All outdoor DAS. And those nodes have been integrated into the network, which has been tremendously helpful from a capacity perspective. But we're just now in the, I call it the infancy, in my view, of really industrializing. And I like to use the word industrialize because it really represents, in my view, what needs to happen with small cells. They need to become much lower cost and much more repeatable with a predictable interval from a how fast can the work get done. And I don't think we as an industry have matured that whole process to the point where it needs to be matured, and we will do that.
So I want to roll the tape back to when T-Mobile failed to merge with AT&T. Mm-hmm. And at that point, there was a decision made, and it was an interesting decision because it turned out to be the right bet when you sold your towers. And, there was a fair amount of money that came in from selling the towers, right? And strategically, was that a decision that was on your plate, or was that
No, there were a bunch of folks.
Was that a
involved
bunch of
in that
Germans involved?
There were a bunch of folks involved in that in that decision. It was a good, you know, in retrospect, it was a good thing for the business. You know, it's an asset that frankly we didn't need to own, that generated a bunch of cash that we used to frankly build our LTE network. So it was a good thing. It's a good thing all the way around.
Well, and not to mention that you got a little bit of spectrum from AT&T to help build it, and you got some money. So putting a little more money on top of that got you over about $6 billion to spend building out.
We're pretty good at just trying to cobble things together. We've been doing it for a couple of decades, and we'll just keep doing it. And
yeah, well, it so far worked. So from that starting point, how much has the macro footprint expanded? When you sold your towers, you had a certain amount of coverage, and you had a certain, let's say, deployment of scale with macros. How much has that grown?
well, you know, I guess the reference point I like to think about and use is that at the beginning of the year, we covered approximately 600,000 square miles. By the end of this year, we'll cover over 1.6 million square miles of the U.S. with our network, excluding roaming, with LTE. So that's a pretty phenomenal increase. You know, there was, if I go back to the beginning of the year, there was obviously GSM footprint that's not in the 600,000 square miles, but from a purely an LTE growth perspective, the last year we've really done a lot in terms of growing that LTE footprint so that we can provide a great service to our customers across the country.
So T-Mobile has also been very good at acquiring spectrum for the right cost and putting together a spectrum portfolio on which you can build a densification strategy. Mm-hmm. So what I'm really trying to understand is, how does your spectrum portfolio influence your densification strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we've often talked about our Achilles heel being not having low-band spectrum and really building on a mid-band grid. And frankly, it's actually turned out, you know, as we think about data, it's actually turned into a real big benefit for the business because of the cell density. That's one of the key factors that's given us the ability to create America's fastest 4G LTE network. So, you know, it was a little bit of our nemesis. You know, if I wind the clock back a decade.
Absolutely, it was a weakness.
But frankly, you know, it's turned into a huge benefit because of that cell density has so helped us with that fastest network.
Yeah, I mean, it reduces latency for sure, and it forces you to space the macros in a certain way, and therefore densification is the nature of your macro network.
Yeah, we're already there.
Yeah.
You know, it's we're not having to add a bunch of sites on a low-band grid in order to be able to create the speeds. We kind of started there.
So does that mean you don't need low-band spectrum?
No.
Oh.
We've very publicly stated we're very interested in acquiring additional low-band spectrum. You know, as most of you folks probably know, we acquired a slug of low-band about 16 months ago, and we've continued to add incremental 700 meg spectrum to that portfolio.
And how did you get that spectrum?
We purchased it from Verizon.
You finagled it.
We just bootstrapped it. We did the best we could.
We're
just the little guys, and
we're
always just trying to do the best we can.
And did a great job with that. I'll tell you, how much you spent for that spectrum?
You know,
it was a swap.
Yeah, there was some spectrum that went, and there was some cash that went, and it was a pretty good deal, we think.
It was a very good deal. So the result is now you do have a bit of low band.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it covers our low band spectrum covers about 190 million pops, of which, you know, and here's the surprising thing. We were pretty surprised as to how well and how effectively we were able to clear that spectrum. You know, TV broadcasters are in channel 51, which interferes with A block. And we were, you know, frankly in the past, let's see, we got the spectrum just a little over a year ago, and we've been able to clear all but about 2.5–3 million pops. And that far exceeds what our expectations were going back. Even at the end of last year, we didn't expect we'd be able to clear all that.
So you align with the way A block aligns, right? So you're not on the AT&T side of 700.
No.
Even though for the rest...
Band 12.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for the rest of your spectrum and for the rest of your network, you align very well with AT&T.
AT&T and Verizon, sure. We have LTE in the AWS band, and we'll begin deploying LTE in the PCS band in some markets this year and into next year.
Yeah, so you still have a little bit of stockpiled spectrum to deploy.
Sure.
So which of these is your small cell band?
We'll deploy small cells in the AWS band initially, but I would expect that over time we'll also deploy in PCS.
Okay, good. That leads me to our next question. So if you don't mind, I'm flashing your questions up on the board. That way these guys can make sure you answer them all.
I'm sure you'll do that.
So where do you need the most help? So far, small cells have been described as the urban densification initiative technology. Is that where your coverage drops off? Because in fact, whenever I've needed to use T-Mobile in the cities, you guys are very strong.
Sure.
So I don't really know how densification in the urban markets are going to help you unless it's a capacity issue.
Yeah, I mean, over time, the industry generally doesn't have the spectrum that it needs. I mean, if you look at the Cisco assessment or the Ericsson assessment as to what capacity requirements are going to be between now and the end of the decade.
By the way, do you believe those?
I think I don't think they're far off.
You don't? Okay.
No, I don't think they're far off.
Okay, good.
But I guess nobody has the spectrum to be able to satisfy those requirements without doing things. Everyone is going to have to build cell sites to meet the needs. And there's not enough spectrum on the horizon to satisfy the requirements with spectrum alone. So there will have to be radio gear that, and I'm choosing my words very carefully, there will have to be radio gear that's deployed to help reuse those frequencies in urban and frankly even in suburban areas. Well,
in fact, I find T-Mobile's coverage in suburban areas to be more iffy than in urban areas.
Well, that's the beauty of 700 is 700 will
remediate
that problem for us. And I don't think I mentioned that of the 190 million pops of 700 that we acquired, between 65 and 70% of our customer base lives in those geographies, which is great for us because it'll help us remediate that issue. And we're pretty thrilled with the Apple announcement yesterday that band 12 will be in the next batch of iPhones. And that we've been very, very successful in terms of getting band 12 deployed in the handsets that are in distribution, and that Apple announcement really rounds out the product line.
So, there is new low-band spectrum that's going to become available.
Sure.
And, I think Tom Wheeler was very bullish about that opportunity and optimistic that the timelines will start to accelerate again and things will start to come together. And all the broadcasters have gone out and doubled their expectations now, right?
Sure.
As a result of that. But you expect to participate?
Oh yeah, we've been very public about our intention to participate in the 600 meg auctions, broadcast auctions coming up at the tail end of the first quarter of next year.
And how will you compete among the other operators who have a little bit of a bigger wallet?
Effectively.
Come on.
Effective, or just, it's an auction.
It's an auction.
We will be effective and we'll be competitive.
So you'll use the typical T-Mobile technique?
What's the typical T-Mobile technique?
Well, you pay half of what everybody else pays.
I'm glad. See? It's worked.
It worked so far. What the hell?
I'm looking across the audience. There's some people grinning ear to ear. Check. It's validated. No, we just do the best we can with the limited resources that we have. We're just the
you
little.
Can't be
we're
the
small
guy anymore.
We're
Come
the little
on,
guy. And
number
we're just trying
three.
to we're trying to do the best job we can with the limited amount of resources.
So does that mean you'll never be number two?
I never said that.
You never said that.
We've got to be able. We're delivering a lot of value to our customers, and we're all about eliminating customer pain points. And to the extent that we can be more competitive in every dimension of the business, we can offer our customers a better proposition than maybe other folks can.
So
we're pretty mindful of how we spend money, and it's ingrained in our culture. It started a long time ago.
Way before John Ledger came on board.
Yeah, it started. Yeah, I mean, that goes clear back to Stapleton for Pete's sake, right?
Exactly. But on the other hand, the Uncarrier has a unique way of competing, and competing on network is part of that strategy, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So what's the Uncarrier strategy for small cells?
I think I talked about it a minute ago. I mean, it's all about, from my perspective, getting to the point where we've industrialized the solutions. The field teams have a reliable method that's low cost that they can deploy with a reasonable horizon around which to get the technology deployed. That's the Uncarriers. That's the thesis. Now, how we get from where we are today, which is, frankly, a batch of scrambled eggs, to a really coherent, reliable method. We're going to have to work together. There's a lot of work to do to get there, but I'm confident that we will over time.
We talked yesterday quite a bit about how AT&T has transformed this. So they went from 40,000 as a number they were shooting for small cells, and that was tied to some budget numbers, and everybody out here was like expecting 40,000 is a nice number to get prime the pump, but then they got to 7,000 and stopped, right? So you obviously don't want to repeat that. You don't want to end up there. How do you get a large enough number that's meaningful to be cost effective? And you keep using the word industrialization. I appreciate it.
So, yeah.
It's a nice term that means almost nothing.
Come on.
What it needs is some definition.
Sure.
Okay. So does that mean that we will come down to a unit that you can deploy in a short amount of time in a almost standardized manner, so that the field workers can get them out there quickly?
Yes.
And how's that going to happen?
We don't know all the answers to those questions.
Okay.
They're great questions, but I think the thing to answer your question, I go back to what we did on backhaul. The approach that we took was a market at a time. We solved the problem a market at a time and said, who can we partner with that can give us critical mass in a market? And I can get owner economics, and I can be the anchor tenant on a network. I mean, there's a number of you in the room that have heard that conversation 7 or 8 years ago. And I think we were pretty effective in doing that. And I don't honestly believe that this is too terribly different from that. I mean,
Okay.
there's some different dimensions to it, but it's fundamentally the same problem.
So let's talk about real estate for a moment. It all starts with where you're going to put this thing.
Sure.
And for small cells, macro is a little different because you don't have that many choices. You got to put a big tower somewhere.
Yep.
But a small cell can go pretty much anywhere.
That's the beauty of it.
And depending on where it goes, it could cost you an arm and a leg, or it could cost you almost nothing.
Well, that's the beauty of it, because there are degrees of flexibility as to where we can go. That by virtue of its nature is going to drive the cost down. It will.
I mean,
that's in my view.
If I were to make a comparison, if McDonald's wants Wi-Fi at every restaurant location, and you can overlay small cells in every McDonald's location without having to pay the McDonald's franchisee for the footprint, because it's somehow tied right to that Wi-Fi. And you were in that business at one time, although you got aced out of it. I mean, is that how you do it?
We chose to get aced out of it.
Okay.
Just to be clear. But being in that Wi-Fi business was really, we'll start there, was really foundational to some of the things we've done with Wi-Fi calling, which I'd say we're way ahead of what anybody else has done. And that really goes back to the roots that we built in that business. almost a decade ago now.
Now, if you only had handsets that worked on Wi-Fi calling, you'd be all set.
We actually do. We've got a lot of handsets.
Right. What, about 10 now?
Most of the portfolio, I think almost all of the portfolio.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So back to your burger joint question. You know, I don't know. You know, that's a possibility, but I don't know that it's the only possibility. There's lots of places. If you're thinking about a 20 or 30 foot elevation above street level, there's lots of places to put radio electronics. It's a much different environment than the environment in a suburban area or even an urban area in terms of getting up, 150 to 200 feet. It's just different. It's radically different, and those choices are going to create competition, which is going to be a good thing. That will help industrialization.
So Sprint is talking about tens of thousands of small cells now that they've woken up again. And, they finally made some progress on their root metrics. And, the number of people they're throwing around is maybe as many as 70,000. Is that a realistic number?
I don't know their network enough to know what you'd have to do.
Oh, you know their network better than anybody.
With 2.5, I'm not sure what you'd have to do with.
That's the issue.
That high band spectrum, you're going to have to deploy a lot of nodes. So maybe, I don't know.
It's not all that higher than PCS, and it's a little higher.
Yeah,
it's a Wi-Fi band.
It's quite a bit high. It's actually quite a bit high. There's a curve there.
There is a little bit
from
of
a propagation perspective.
Okay.
It's a very different band.
So we know industrialization is the key to this decision.
Yep.
So let's switch to DAS. You inherited some outdoor DAS, and really haven't played much further than what you already had in your portfolio. Do you see DAS in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for DAS. I mean, we've tried to kick the pendulum a little bit on this, with some of the DAS is dead comments, because frankly, the radio equipment that's available today is far more capable than it was 5 or 6 years ago, and as a consequence, we've got an arsenal of tools in our toolbox we just didn't have, and going back even 2 or 3 years ago. So DAS there's a place for DAS, but frankly, it's terribly expensive as contrasted with simply deploying radios across an environment, whether it's outside or inside.
That's if you build it yourself.
Yes. Well, regardless of whether we build it, we can typically build a radio environment with radios a lot less than even my fair share of the DAS network.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's been my experience. It's terribly expensive.
And some of the new DAS is starting to look like small cells, and yet when you're third guy in, that economics don't prove, huh?
It just depends on the venue. And I think the other point is that being the third guy in doesn't mean that I had any say in the topography and the density, because I might not need the same density that somebody else needs, but I end up having to pay my fair third of it, which frankly, I have a problem with that. The whole model is terribly broken from my perspective.
So here comes the Uncarrier to fix the model, right?
We'll give it our damnedest.
Yeah,
you know that.
Absolutely. This is the chance you have to influence that model. Okay, a couple of quick ones just to get them out of the way.
Sure.
Wi-Fi is a major part of your strategy. You've been the leader in Wi-Fi calling. What are you doing in trying to bring unlicensed Wi-Fi spectrum into the LTE portfolio?
Yeah, we're optimistic on LAA, license assisted access, and we'll do some trials later this year and into early next year, and we believe we'll have a commercially available product, sometime mid to the latter part of next year.
So we're not calling it LTEU, we're calling it LAA. And how is it different? See, I should have asked him a finance question.
LAA, yeah, this is pretty deep for me. LAA is really kind of the next version of LTEU. that we'll see later in the middle of 2016.
Right. The first, initial trials have been with LTU, and now LAA is coming. And in terms of link aggregation with Wi-Fi, it allows you to use Wi-Fi for the payload, right? Mm-hmm. But you have to pair it up with an LTE channel.
With an LTE channel, sure.
Yeah, which works well for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how much flack are you going to take from the Wi-Fi community for being in the lead on that?
Well, we've seen a lot of demos from the Qualcomm guys as to the effectiveness of cooperation and sharing of the Wi-Fi spectrum with Wi-Fi, and we believe that that LAA will be a good neighbor and not interfere with the unlicensed access that other folks will have.
Yeah. So I heard from the Wi-Fi Lights they're willing to go along with this as long as you share your LTE spectrum. That works for you?
Yeah, I'm not so sure that's going to work.
Why not?
I'm not so sure that's going to work very well.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure how that would work.
That's okay. My jokes don't usually work. So your Wi-Fi calling is working well. I use it frequently.
Good.
And
thanks for being a customer.
Well, I have to be a customer. What I find, though, is it worked best after they put a Femto in my house. Mm-hmm. And before that, it was a bit iffy, wasn't it? Your Femtos are really Wi-Fi devices, aren't they?
Yeah, we've got a Femto that's absolutely
personal
Wi-Fi.
cell spot.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a Wi-Fi router.
It's a Wi-Fi
router that we've done some things to. It's probably one of the best Wi-Fi routers that is available on the market today.
Well, it's sitting right next to my Fios router, which is very odd. But it functions completely differently. Mm-hmm. It optimizes my T-Mobile experience, and for the purpose, especially for Wi-Fi calling, it works wonderfully.
Good.
So I'm happy about that. But the minute I walk beyond its coverage, gone.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't work on the normal Wi-Fi. I don't know why, but it should. But it's not. So I got to tweak that.
We need to follow up with you on that.
You've put a lot of those out, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. A lot is a good answer. Yeah.
Well, you've spent money on it because I didn't have to pay for mine.
That's right.
Right? I just walked in and said, I need some better coverage, and they just handed it to me.
You're a valuable customer.
Apparently, I got to give it back at some point.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
That's exactly right.
So, that'll work out fine. So you were talking a bit about how you might start looking at neutral host. Tell me how neutral host changes the economics for these kind of deployments.
Well, I mean, I think, back to kind of where we are, we've spent the last 3 years really working feverishly to deploy an LTE network on a nationwide basis. And, we're now getting to the point where the next layers of things need to be done. And one of those things is, venue coverage, where frankly, there are a lot of folks, that have beaten us to those venues that will end up going on neutral host systems. In fact, we've built a small team to actually go focus on doing just that. So you'll see more of us in that space in the, over the course of the next several months and quarters.
In fact, there are forecasts that say, in terms of coming on board, you're going to be a big wave in neutral host. You're going to participate a lot more than you ever have. So I think that expectation is among the neutral host operators as well.
I think that's true. I mean, we, you look at the demographics of our customer base, and they go to football games, they go to baseball games, they go to basketball games, they go to concerts, and John periscopes at many of them. So, it's imperative that we get a coverage solution in those spaces to meet folks' expectations.
Now, what John would like, though, is for everybody to start uploading everything, right? So you're going to have to start getting those systems to work upstream.
Yeah, that's they're all, and it's not. I think it's an industry issue. I think we're just at the we're at the tip of the spear on this one.
Yeah, very early.
Yeah.
Okay, so I promised to give you the opportunity to thwart some of these comments because you guys have taken a bad rap here. And, Alan's a good guy.
Alan's a great guy.
He's as provocative as his boss. So he likes to say things, and, they're always taken out of context.
Sure.
So give me a little context for what he had to say.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to this a minute ago. We're really just trying to move the pendulum. There are an arsenal of solutions available to meet coverage needs today that weren't available 2 or 3 years ago. And that solution set is, drastically less expensive. And we're just trying to shift the pendulum to say, look, there are other ways of solving these problems from a coverage perspective beyond a traditional DAS system. And frankly, the options that are available today are a heck of a lot cheaper. And I don't know why I should have to be burdened with the economics that somebody incurred 2 or 3 or 4 years ago to build that network. That's the long and the short of it.
Mm-hmm. And he's done a good job. He's pushed them pretty hard, and he's forced them to rethink everything. So actually, I think it's a very constructive set of comments, even though, again, he's looks like a curmudgeon, right?
Alan's a great guy. He does a really good job. He does a good job for the business.
Terrific. So Dave, what question would you like to ask me?
This is fun.
Come on, go ahead, ask me a question.
Well, wait, so here's somebody asked me this question last night. If you were stuck on a desert island, what would be the 3 foods you'd take? You were limited to 3 foods. I'm just kidding. I'm just having fun with you.
That is a great one.
Is that great? I thought it was a very insightful. You'll really learn a lot about a person by asking that, by understanding the answer to that question.
So I'll answer you.
Yeah.
All right. Coconut.
Yeah.
Mango. And let's see. What's my third one? That's enough fruit. So probably some salmon.
Yeah. Good.
How about you?
Chicken parm, steak, and
some carbs you need.
There was something else in that list.
French fries?
No.
All right. Dave, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're a good sport.